Alright, so basically selection sorts through the array for the amount of elements in the array, and it finds the lowest number, then switches it with the first element in the array, and after it's finished, it finds the next lowest number and switches it with the second element, and so on. The sorting method is very efficient and can handle negative numbers.
Alright, so we made selection sort as a class, so then you could pass different arrays into the class, so then you would never have to make a local storage. And so we made sort as a method which accepts an array for modification and sorting. So we have imin as the index of the lowest possible one that we have set up. Alright, so, and then we have L, which is equal to the length. And we have that set up so then we don't have to type r.length. It's just for convenience. It's not really any other reason for it. Alright, so we have a embedded for loop to do our sorting. And the first for loop tells us how many times we've sorted through. So the first time j is going to be 0. So the index of the lowest possible one is going to start out at 0. So then we sort and we find the lowest index, and that's switched with that one. And that's how selection sort works. And if we didn't have this increasing every time, then we would just have a loop that would just go through the entire array, swapping the lowest one with the lowest one for the entire time. It wouldn't work at all. So we have to have this in there. Okay, so now we have is our second for loop, and this is what actually compares each element to that lowest one. So let's say our first element is 1. If our next one is 0, then it's going to see that 0 is lower than 1, so now it's going to change imin to that 0 element, and then it's going to continue on down the entire array, checking for the lowest one, and if it can't find any other ones or does find another one, then it'll keep looking for the lowest one, then once it finds the lowest one, it'll switch with imin, or with j, with imin. And that's what swap does right below that.
Alright, so here in our swap method, we're passing the array for access to the elements. And then here we're creating a temp of the first one, which allows us to modifying it without destroying the original data. Then we're setting the original element to the second element, and then setting the second element to the temporary.
Okay, so here are the multiple choice questions for selection sorter. Now, the answer for number 1 is E. And this is because selection sorter does not care whether or not the array is forwards, backwards, or completely jumbled, like 1, 2, and 3. It makes the exact same number of comparisons, and it goes through the array no matter what. In 1, it's going to go through and it's going to see if 2 is smaller than 3. You can see is 2 smaller than 4, is 2 smaller than 5, is 2 smaller than 6. And then it's going to switch 2 with 2. And it's going to go to 3. Is 3 smaller than 4, is 3 smaller than 5, is 3 smaller than 6. And the exact same way with 2, it's going to see is 6 smaller than 5? No. Is 5 smaller than, sorry, excuse me, yes. Is 5 smaller than 4? No. 4 is smaller than 5. Is 4 smaller than 3? No. 3 must be smaller then. Is 3 smaller than 2? No. 2 switches with 6. So it's making the exact same number of comparisons. The only difference is, I guess, if you had a multi-thousand number array, it might take slightly longer because it has to store and swap and do all that stuff. But it's making the exact same number of comparisons either way. And so for number 2, we chose A as the correct answer. Now this is because at the beginning of each sort, J is always going to be starting at 0, and it's always going to be less than I. Alright, and 0 is always going to be less than or equal to A with the element of J, and that's always going to be less than or equal to A the element of I. Now this is because J element is always going to be smaller than I, because J is the one that's switching with I to be put closer to the very beginning, because we're sorting lowest to smallest, or lowest to largest. And so that is why those two is set up like that, and the other two are just incorrect and not true.